Hello and welcome to another Waterworld tutorial. Today I'm going to explain to you how to run a stacked scenario which is combining different policy exercises. So for instance a land use change with a climate change scenario combined, so you can assess the combined impacts on your area of interest. This is a feature that is available from Hyperuser and up. I'm going to assume that you know how to run a baseline. That's explained in other videos, and so today I'm going to be focusing on Madagascar. I've already run a baseline, and so I'll explain to you how to do a stacked scenario. Essentially a stacked scenario, to set it up, is no different than any other policy exercise. So once you've run your baseline, we'll go to step 4, policy exercises, and we can just set up the scenario in the way we used to. So I'm first going to set up a land use change scenario, land use and land cover change. So I'm going to select this option, click submit choice, and then for this particular scenario we want to run the land use change model, so the quick look land use change model. So I'm going to click on the plus minus next to land use change model, and here we can select what kind of land use change model we want to run. I'm going to name my scenario a stacked scenario because we're going to add the climate change scenario on top of this, so it's going to be land use change with climate change. The scenario I'm going to be running is a business as usual deforestation scenario. So we're going to continue recent rates of deforestation based on the Global Forest Watch data. So I'm going to completely deforest areas, so minus 100 for the tree cover, and leave these to 0, where GFC loss so this is recent rates of deforestation, continue for another 50 years, and we're not going to speed up that deforestation, so we're leaving the multiply recent rate by 1, and we're not going to add any forest loss here as well. We can also have a look at the recent rates of deforestation. If we click on the compare link here, that will bring up a page where we can start comparing the different data sets of deforestation that are built in the system. So this will take a little bit to load. So once that's done building, we can now look at the recent deforestation percentage, which is the percentage of land that is deforested in the last decade or so, for which we have the data, and the recent deforestation rate, which is the percentage of land lost per year. So if we look at the GFC which we selected for our scenario, GFC percent deforested, we see that there is a mean of about 0.99% of land for Madagascar has been lost over that period, with a deforestation rate of 0.083 percentage of land. And so this is a way to quickly compare the different deforestation products we have in there. So there's also the Forma and Terra I, which is not finalized yet for this particular region. So once we've done having a look at this and see if there's actually deforestation in your area, and the deforestation rate, so this is the rate we're going to be projecting forwards for the next 50 years, we can close this page and we can continue setting up our scenario. So we're going to leave this at 0, the recent fractional forest cover losses. We're going to allocate by agricultural suitability, yes. Include plant infrastructure if available, yes. Include likely new transport routes if available, yes. And we're leaving the management effectiveness index to 1. And the other thing we want to do is we want to leave protected areas intact. So I'm going to select the protected areas database that we have in here, which is the UNIP WCMC WCPA. And if I click on that, it should open up that page, or map I should say, and that shows me where all the protected areas are. So we're going to target our deforestation scenario anywhere where there is recent deforestation and anywhere where it's not a protected area, so where we have values of 0 in this map. I can close this now, and I'm going to say where protected areas equals 0, and that will exclude it. We're not going to include any other rules, and we're going to define converted areas as the most suitable agriculture for that region. And we're going to leave fraction of water exposed to contamination to the default, which is 1, and the mean conversion cost we're going to leave to the default as well. And so once we set all this up, we can now start building our scenario. So I'm going to click on check and submit, and then the system will start building this scenario. This could take a while. See progress here when we hover our mouse over these green blocks, and so there's a lot of files that need to be copied over first. So once the system is done setting up your scenario, that will take a few minutes, we can have a look at the scenario we've just developed by clicking on the show the baseline and scenario. So this will allow us to do a comparison between the baseline maps and the maps that have changed for this scenario, and this will take a little while as well. And these are all the maps that have potentially changed under a land use change scenario. Now obviously we set a deforestation scenario, so we can look at the cover of tree covered ground, for instance, and on the left is our baseline. So we had a mean tree cover of 16%, and in our scenario that is now gone down to 12, and you can see these areas here and here are particularly deforested, and we set it to change that tree cover to the most suitable agriculture. So I expect a change in croplands as well, and you can see that we have a large increase in some croplands in those areas, and pastures likely as well, and indeed some of these areas have been converted to croplands and pastures. So it's always good to inspect these maps before you continue building a scenario. But in this case the system has set up the scenario the way we expect, so the changed land use maps are good to go. So I can close this now and go back to the previous pop-up window, and now we're going to select the option of stack further changes. So we're going to build a compound scenario. So we've done the land use change scenario, and we're now going to add to that a climate change scenario. So I'm going to click on climate change, submit my choice, and you can see the name for my scenario is already in there because it's a stacked scenario. So now we're going to set up a multi-model mean scenario. So I'm going to use one of these options that is in here. So I'm going to choose the latest assessment, CMIP5 data. I'm going to choose one of the RCPs. I'm going to go for the sort of middle of the road RCP 4.5. Data from WorldClim, and we're going to select a mean of all models. So you can select each individual climate change model that we have in the system. You can do a mean of all models minus 1 standard deviation, or plus 1 standard deviation. But in this case I'm going to select mean of all models, and I'm going to do that for the period 2050s, because we also used 50 years into the future for our land use change scenario. So once I've set that up, I can then simply click on submit, and then the system will start developing this climate change scenario. So there are 19 GCMs that it's going to combine. So this will take a few minutes to set up. So once the system is ready with building your scenario, which takes a little while, we can have another look at the difference between the baseline and the scenario. So if I click on this link here, I will open up a window that will then start generating a comparison. And once that's done, you can see the 12 precipitation maps for each month and the 12 temperature maps, and the comparison between the baseline and the scenario situation. So if I look, for instance, at the temperature for January, we had a mean of 24 degrees Celsius in the baseline and 27 in the scenario situation, which is the mean of all those models under the RCP 4.5 scenario. And similarly, we can have a look at changes in precipitation, for instance in June, and we'll see that actually in this particular month the mean precipitation for the tile, or for Madagascar, has decreased with 1 millimeter a month. So once you're happy with the scenario, we can then close this window, and we've now built our stacked scenario. And as you can see here, we can stack even further changes, so we can add other policy options as well, or we can set the scenario running straight away from here. So if I click on run scenario, then it will set this scenario run in motion, and you can view the outputs just like with any other policy exercise for the system. Okay, I hope that was useful, and thank you for listening.